Our reading assignment this time is a fragment from what many scholars believe are the lecture notes of a sophist. We do not know for sure how much of this text is missing, and so we don't know for sure how to interpret the purpose of the text. In any event, I think you'll agree with me that it's an intriguing, even if difficult and challenging text. The fragment is usually entitled Dissoi Logoi, which is Greek for contrasting arguments. This is a theme announced in the first sentence of the fragment, although again we don't know for sure if that necessarily represents the introduction to the text or whether that is just a transition statement to a section of a much larger speech. A better title for this fragment might be Apparent Reality versus Invisible Truth. The speech explores whether there are unchanging essences that exist apart from human perspective and experience, or whether all we have are the impressions and experiences of the world in our specific time and space. The composer of this text seems to prefer the argument that there is no reality independent of our experience of it. Everything that we believe or know depends on where we stand. In other words, the text reflects the cultural relativism of the sophists. At the same time, the speechwriter acknowledges that this is not the only way to see things. Some people believe that there are unchanging essences, and that therefore something like the good is the same for everybody, whether they realize it or not. The text explores both the relativist and the essentialist way of looking at a number of issues, such as beauty, justice, truth, and morality. Here are some questions to consider as you meditate on this text. One question to think about is whether there can ever be any such thing as a common good from a culturally relativist position such as that articulated by the sophists. Could we ever agree on any vision of the common good if our vision of the good only ever depended on our own interests and perspectives? Or how could we ever be persuaded to consider the world from a different perspective if our understanding of the world is so constrained by our own way of seeing things? Another question might be about what is accomplished by a text that explores two contrasting points of view. How do we benefit from the kind of rhetorical skill displayed here, which is making opposing and contradictory cases before advancing one over the other? I don't know about you, but when I read this text, I can sometimes have an experience of disorientation, that the world sort of spinning around me. What is accomplished by this type of disorientation or questioning of one's own easily held assumptions? What does it mean to recognize that there will always be someone somewhere who sees the world differently than you? And how does this impact the way that you or I speak and think? Closely related to this last question is what is achieved by the reluctance to be absolutist or certain about anything. What is helpful about being able to articulate two different points of view in a plausible way before expressing your own qualified view? Is it necessary to explore a contrasting viewpoint in order to coherently articulate your own? Does the world actually make the most sense to us through that kind of an opposition? Finally, we can consider the mission of the educated orator described toward the end of the pamphlet, where the anonymous author says, "I consider it a characteristic of the same man and of the same art to be able to converse in brief questions and answers, to know the truth of things, to plead one's cause correctly, to be able to speak in public, to have an understanding of argument skills, and to teach people about the nature of everything, both how everything is and how it came into being." First of all, will not the man who knows about the nature of everything also be able to act rightly in regard to everything? Furthermore, the man acquainted with the skills involved in argument will also know how to speak correctly on every topic. For the man who intends to speak correctly must speak on the topics of which he has knowledge, and he will, one must at any rate suppose, have knowledge of everything. That's quite a grand goal and mission for a communication professional. We find here a kind of argument for a liberal arts education. A well-educated and trustworthy speaker and communicator has to know about everything and to be able to make arguments about everything. It would be interesting to explore what you think of this mission statement for communication professionals and rhetoricians. Is that how you regard the goal of your college education, knowing about everything? I'm sure there are other questions and perhaps arguments that will occur to you as you read this text and think it through, and I look forward to discussing it with you next Tuesday. Have a good evening.